I'm on, huh? Can everybody hear me okay? Now, make sure. Now I'm on. Can you hear me back there? Okay, good. We are in the book of Daniel. Good morning again to everyone. We're going to be in chapter 6. We closed out chapter 5 seeing the Babylonian Empire being handed over, if you will, to the Medo-Persian Empire. Daniel is still the key character in the book. We're introduced to a new king, King Darius or Darius of the Medo-Persian. He's not over the whole kingdom, but he's over the Chaldean portion of it. So we're going to look and see one of the very first events that sort of confronts Daniel with the new kingdom. Before we do that, Will Reagan is going to lead us in an opening prayer.
Great Father in heaven, we come before your mighty throne right now as students of your word, Father. Let this hour as we open up the holy text, Father. So much blood has been spilled for this opportunity, Father, for us. We're thankful for every word that was chosen throughout time, looking at it and seeing you topple kingdoms, Father. You forecasting prophecies during this time, Father, for us to look back now as students and find the application that's applicable to our life. We look at the grandiose nature that Babylon was and these kings, Father, and their egotism. Help us to assess our own life as we study this, Father, and our egotism. Help us to understand Daniel, Father, a man that is all in for you. Help us, Father, to learn from that. How should we be all in for you, Father, as Daniel was? Be with the minds of the students, Father. Help us to act, Father. Help us to get activated in our life when we leave this place. Help us not just to be students only, Father. Help us to be servants unto you. It's your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Yeah, I like that. After we understand Daniel, we can adjust our lives to be a little more like his. So, hearty amen to that. First, kind of a housekeeping thing. This is my last Sunday. Wednesday will be my last class teaching this. We're going to move into Daniel chapter 7 next Sunday. There's a syllabus out in the foyer that Jimmy's put together, and on Wednesday night, he'll have the first lesson for chapter 7. So that's just in preparation for next week. This morning, though, we're going to try to wrap up chapter 6. If things go the way I plan, we'll be able to do that. And then Wednesday night, just going to have some Q&A. Try to review the book in a fashion of question and answer and see what we all got from the study. We introduced chapter 6 Wednesday night, didn't get very far into it, but one of the things that we noticed was that the new king, Darius, set over the kingdom, his portion of the kingdom, which was the largest portion probably, but he still had a boss above him, Cyrus. We're not introduced to him just yet, but he'll be on the scene soon. But Darius set over his portion of the kingdom 120 satraps, which we decided that was something like a prince or maybe a governor, but people to help manage his administration, people that he trusted. And over those 120, he picked 3 men that those 120 would report to. And those 3 men were of a higher character and had proven themselves to be more valuable in the administration of this kingdom. Daniel was one of those people. And over a period of time, we don't know exactly how much, probably not a whole lot, Daniel proved himself to even be more distinguished than these other 2. That created some problems, and that's kind of the introduction to what we're going to deal with today. One of the things that I came across in studying this was kind of a definition. I asked what it was that Daniel did. I think it was John who said that he was a spiritual man. I forget the exact phrase, but what Daniel did to distinguish himself was he had an excellent spirit. And I asked John what that was, and he goes, "That's a righteous man," which I think is excellent. I think that's really what it comes down to. Daniel had proven himself to be a righteous man. By now, Daniel is an old man. And we don't know how old, but he was in the Babylonian captivity for 70 years, and he's probably coming to an end of that right now. And if he was anywhere from 16 to 20, he's well into his 80s, maybe 90 years old by now. And over the course of his time in Babylon, he had demonstrated a quality that was very unique and easily identified. And somehow Darius heard about that, and he was described as this man of excellent spirit, or a righteous man. I want you to just for a minute listen to Psalm 15, because I think this will describe what a righteous man is. The writer says, "He who walks blamelessly and does," well, let me back up. "O Lord, who shall sojourn in your tent? Who shall dwell in your holy hill? He who walks blamelessly and does right, and speaks truth in his heart, who does not slander with his tongue, and does not do evil to his neighbor, nor takes a reproach against his friend, and whose eyes a vile person is despised, but who honors those who fear the Lord, who swears to his own hurt and does not change, who does not put out his money at interest and does not take a bribe against the innocent. He who does these things shall never be moved." Those are the qualities and the characteristics I think that Daniel demonstrated and were recognized. And as we see this story, if you will, unfold, his enemies despised him for it. They were jealous and envious of him because of it. So I'm going to pick it up in verse 4, but I'm just going to read verses 4 and 5 just to kind of set the stage for this morning. "Then the high officials," minus Daniel. Daniel was a high official, but he's not included right here. "And the satraps sought to find ground for a complaint against Daniel in regard to the kingdom. But they could find no ground for complaint or any fault, because he was faithful, and no error or fault was found in him. Then these men said, 'We shall not find any ground or complaint against Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his God.'" So we don't really know why they were envious or jealous, but the king somehow identified something about Daniel that elevated him above even the other highest officials. And they knew that Daniel was a foreigner. And that really probably irritated, aggravated him, probably prompted the jealousy and the envy. My question to you is, what did Daniel just describe? How is it he explained the reaction of these high officials toward him? I'm not sure that's a clear question. But why would they say that? What did they do to try to find fault with Daniel? Yeah, we don't really know.
They took advantage
Right.
of his righteousness.
Pardon?
They took advantage of his righteousness.
They took advantage of his, and how did they do that? Or what did they do to try to do that, I guess is the question. And that's not fair to you, so. Rick.
We massaged Darius into a decree that went against Daniel's religion. And I think that Darius realized
Okay, you're jumping ahead. I'm going to let you fill that in a minute.
that he had been tricked into. So they schemed to do this.
Okay, hold that thought, because that's the next question. Lynn and then Phil.
Well, I think that up to this point, they've been judged, they judged themselves against Daniel as sort of a standard of how they are behaving, and Daniel's doing better than them. So they are jealous that he is excelling where they are not. And the only place that they can find where there's a difference between them and Daniel is his worship of his God. So they decide to You find a way to use that against him.
Yeah, find the conflict. If he's worshiping his God and not our God, can we find a conflict that we can trip him up in? Okay, but that's still, excellent point. That's still not what I'm asking. Phil, you've read my mind?
In verse 4, they sought to find ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom.
Yes.
So just ain't like any other politician. We're going to find his dirty little secret, and we're going to expose it.
Okay.
There just wasn't any.
There just wasn't any. So what did they do? I'm kind of fast forward to today. What do we do today? You know, we've experienced this over the last number of years. What do the enemies politically do with one another? They try to find dirt, and there's a lot of it. And it's, unlike Daniel, it's just everywhere. Probably economically, business dealings, maybe the way he treated people, the way he took advantage or not of, you know, the citizenry. They tried everything they could within the kingdom environment to find some fault in Daniel, and they couldn't. Hence, I read Psalm 15. That's who Daniel was. He was a man who could dwell with God, and he had proven that. And as this story, if you will, unfolds, we're going to see that these enemies knew Daniel had some habits that he followed very religiously, and they were going to try to take advantage of those habits and trip him up with his devotion to Jehovah and contrast that with the devotion to the gods of their own country. And their hope was to try to get Darius to a point, or Darius to a point where he had to make a decision. Hence, Rick's point, now, say again, if you will, what these guys did.
Through conniving and scheming, they come up with a plan that will separate Darius from Daniel. Because they understand that Daniel and Darius are close together because Darius truly trusts Daniel.
Yeah.
And that is the scheme that they come up with and essentially trick him into signing on.
Yeah, it was definitely a plot to trick Darius or Darius. How are we going to say that? I don't know. Who cares? Okay, so that's kind of where we're leading to. So let's pick it up in verse 6. Read down through verse 9. Then these high officials and the satraps came by agreement to the king and said, now listen carefully to this language. Verse 4, I'm going to back up. The high officials and the satraps sought to find ground. Two categories. The high officials and the satraps. Probably just within the Babylonian environment, not the entire Chaldean, but just two groups are mentioned. Verse 6. Then these high officials and satraps came by agreement to the king and said, O King Darius, live forever. All the high officials of the kingdom, the prefects, the satraps, the counselors, the governors, all agree, or are agreed, that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction that whoever makes a petition to any god or man for 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document so that it cannot be changed according to the law of the Medes and Pers, which cannot be revoked. Therefore, King Darius signed the document and the injunction. So this is what Rick said. These guys came together and went to the king and said, in honor of you, we should make you should sign a document that we've prepared for you that says, if anybody makes an appeal or prays to a god or a man, they have to use you as a mediator. Why did Darius fall for that? And we don't know. So this is kind of speculation, but I think as we read through it, we can get some pretty good ideas. But what do you think? Why would a new king listen to these officials and agree to something like that? Ryan.
Flattery is often the greatest weapon. So I imagine, in this case, they probably praised him. You know, you're so awesome. You make such wonderful decisions.
Okay, so played to his ego. And I think that's very likely, very likely. What else? Lynn?
Well, there's a possibility that Darius did not know the ins and outs of how Daniel worshipped his God. It looks like that in their scheming to bring down Daniel, they must have followed him or watched him, because the minute they made this decree, they like ran to his room to go and see that he's doing it, you know. So they must have known that he did this, and it was his regular custom. But maybe Darius knew he was religious, maybe, but he did not know at this point the specifics of it.
Okay, that's all true. We're going to develop that a little bit more as we move on. But still, other than maybe playing to his ego, why do you think Darius would have said, yeah, I like this new rule, knowing that if he signed it under the Medo-Persian law, he could never rescind it. So if he agreed to this, it was cast in stone, absolutely permanent. Why do you think, other than ego, Ryan?
It would also unify the people, so they're all doing the same thing.
How so?
Well, it's a command that they all must follow, so they're all playing an active role in it. And ultimately, I mean, they can't create any other God or any other of their own opinions, of their own choices without his.
Okay, so kind of a unifying effort. I get that. Yes, sir.
Said that all the governors, they told them that all the governors came up with this idea that this would happen. So they're including Daniel and established that they trusted Daniel, so maybe he's thinking, oh, Daniel's okay with this, maybe it's a good idea.
Yeah, okay, so Daniel was included, and we have already established that Darius really elevates Daniel. So if Daniel's included in this group, it's like, oh, okay, I hadn't thought of that. I like that.
It was just for 30 days.
It was just for 30 days, which is some time limited, so that's kind of nice. But there's another piece here that I think is likely, at least part of what might have helped Darius kind of agree to this. All right, Carl.
I'm thinking allegiance, just to do something that would be an allegiance test. It doesn't have to be about Darius. It could be, we're moving forward, this kingdom needs to have, 100% allegiance. We see this sort of thing today. When something is told to a corporation, everybody has to sign off on it. We all have to be in agreement. So I'm giving Darius a little bit of benefit of the doubt. That's why.
I think that's important, that we're not too critical of him. That kind of leaves the kind of thought that I had, which is not different than in a year, so just maybe developing a little bit better or fuller. He's relatively new king over a very big territory. It's interesting, I'm going to backtrack it just a second. These high officials aren't altogether truthful. They came in and said, we're in agreement. Everybody, named more than just those two groups that were upset with Daniel, named a total of 4 groups. So they're trying to embellish the agreement that the officials have made a little bit in the presence of Darius. So he's like, oh, everybody's on board with this. The edict was that they had to use Darius as a mediator. So you talk to Darius, he is your representative to the gods. What would that do for Darius? Wouldn't that help him understand his citizenry better? Who is it you worship? Why is it you pray the way you do? What appeals are you making? I can understand my people better if I'm kind of a mediator between them and their God. And there were lots of them. So it gave him an opportunity to learn more about his people. So if he was thinking, all right, this would make me closer to my people, help me relate to them better, maybe be more effective with them, maybe get them to also listen to me when I might have to deliver something that isn't particularly friendly or welcomed by them. So on Darius's behalf, maybe he was quick to sign this because he thought it would help him have a better relationship with everybody that he worked with. Certainly it played to his ego. Certainly it helped with the allegiance. But I think it might have also included a desire on his part to be closer to his people and understand them a little better. Comments or thoughts on that? Nobody's going to disagree, right? Okay. So if that's the case, let's move on. Now, this now kind of points out to the point that Lynn made. Darius had habits, he had traditions that were well known, and his enemies did their homework. They were watching Daniel. They knew what those habits were. When Daniel knew of the document, so he wasn't part of this group, but it didn't take long before the news of, hey, this new edict, this new directive has come out, everybody has to follow. Daniel was going to learn about that pretty quick. So when he did hear about it, he went to his house where he had windows in the upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he had done previously. Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and plea before his God. Then they came near and said before the king concerning the injunction, O king, did you not sign an injunction that anyone who makes a petition to any god or man within 30 days except to you, O king, shall be cast in the den of lions? Notice that they started this with a question that had only one answer. So the king is instantly like, well, yeah. And then they trapped him with that right there, with the way they started with a question. The king answered and said, the thing stands fast according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be revoked. Then they answered and said before the king, Daniel, who was one of the exiles from Judah, paid no attention to you, O king, or the injunction you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. So here's the conspiracy laid out. What do you think Darius' or Darius' reaction to that is? I haven't got there, but you've probably read it. So if Darius was thinking he's trying to be closer to his people, we already know he has a very high regard for Daniel. What do you suppose is in Darius' mind right now?
Verse 14 says he was greatly displeased with himself. He knew he'd been tricked. He didn't think it through.
Yeah. He was distressed. What was he distressed about? I think there's a couple things. He was distressed within himself. So first, I just got tricked. Man, I didn't see that one. I should have thought that through a little more carefully. The thoughts I had about signing this document weren't what just played out. So I'm distressed within myself. What else? Who just delivered the message? Rick.
Well, the message was delivered by the other 2 high officials that did not like Daniel. And immediately Darius looks for a way to rescue him.
Okay.
And he can't find him.
Yeah. He wanted, there's no way out of this. They started with that question. Didn't you sign that? And it can't be rescinded? So he was trapped. Jimmy.
Come on, Dennis figured out. They could be very angry at these 2 that had been part of the thing. All of them are contrived this trap.
Yeah.
We're gonna find out that.
Yeah. Yeah. Think about for a minute. You're the leader. It could be in business, it could be in politics, it could be anything you want. But you're the leader, and you have trusted people that report to you that have proven themselves worthy of the position that they have and the trust that you've placed in them. You just realized they came to me with a false accusation or a trick to get me to sign something so that they could make an accusation against a man who is truly trustworthy. And he just realized the way this whole thing played out, they just tricked me. My trusted people, the ones that I relied on and thought I could put my confidence in, they just tricked me. I'm stuck. Ryan.
Well, and he really likes Daniel, so he's really disappointed. This is going to be a great opportunity for him to learn the power of God, too.
Yeah, this is a great teaching moment, isn't it? Okay, so let's pick up the reading then, verse 14. Then the king, when he heard these words, was much distressed and set his mind to deliver Daniel, and he labored until the sun went down to rescue him. Now, we don't know what time of day it was that he received this message, or the message was delivered by his officials. But the way it's written, probably sometime in the morning. We don't know exactly what times Daniel went to pray. Probably like 9, noon, and 3, something like that. So if the officials that put together this conspiracy, were watching Daniel, could have been as early as 9 o'clock in the morning. They went to see, is he going to, keep doing what he's always done? And sure enough, so then they take that message to the king. The rest of the day, the king tried to figure out what he could do to get Daniel out of this fix, and what he could do to get himself out of this fix. Sundown came and he couldn't come up with a solution. He was just stuck. All right. Pick up where I am. All right. He labored until the sun went down to rescue him. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, "Know, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and Persians that no injunction or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed." So they're just kind of twisting the knife a little bit in him, just kind of making him force his hand to act right now. Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the lion's den. The king declared to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you." Let's stop right there. Somebody have a different version that doesn't read just like mine did? May your God deliver you. Yeah, Brooke Mullen.
Mine says, your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver.
Okay, that's probably a more accurate rendering of what is said here than what I just read you. Your God will deliver you. What does that say about Darius? I think there's a couple things that we can pull out just from that simple phrase. Your king will deliver you. Your God will deliver you. Sherry.
He wants God to be
Okay.
the deliverer of Daniel. I mean, it's very heartfelt, it seems like, because it's the first thing that he says, "May your God deliver you."
Yeah.
He wants it to be what Daniel was saying.
Yeah, we know that Darius wants this not to play out, but he also knows about Daniel's faith, doesn't he? That's pretty much what elevated him in the mind of Darius anyway. He doesn't want this to happen, but he has faith in Daniel's faith, and that's something that we need to make sure we understand. The king has faith in Daniel's faith. He's seen Daniel, and he knows Daniel is faithful to his God. He's not even going to let something like this derail him. So I have faith that his faith will sustain him. All right, Rick.
I would suggest that contextually, Darius is fully aware of what happened during the time of Nebuchadnezzar. And with the three friends of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they're delivered from an unjust decree. So, and Darius sitting up all night and fretting over Daniel in the lion's den, to me kind of helped indicate this. He was really hoping that this could happen again.
Yeah, without a doubt. He was definitely hoping that. He actually says he believed that it could, probably would. He said, your God will deliver you. And it, like I said, it's probably a little more accurate rendering of what the language was. We also see that Daniel's faith was what it had always been. Didn't seem to be worried. So the king says, your God will deliver you. And then the stone, verse 17, was brought and laid out in the mouth of the den. And the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. I'm going to stop there. What do you think the significance of the king's signet and then the official's signet is? Kind of says it so that nothing can be changed, but how? Explain that. So we'll start with the king. His signet is supreme in this circumstance. What that signifies is the king signed it. You can't change it. I don't care who you are in the kingdom. You can't change it. So what do you think the significance of the high official's signet is then? It's the same. The king can't change it either. So both of them have said, this is going to stay closed until the event plays out. The king couldn't go in and sneak Daniel out because the officials already put their signet on it. The officials couldn't go in and make sure that Daniel got chewed up without breaking their law. So it protected both parties. It said that the door is sealed and nobody can open it until the event plays out. That's the significance of it. All right, then verse 18. The king went to his palace, spent the night fasting, no diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled him. So the king goes back and he's distraught. He's decided he's not going to eat, maybe on purpose, maybe he couldn't eat, but he couldn't sleep. This whole thing has just upset him so much that his life was in turmoil. We're going to find him getting up early in the morning and seeing what the outcome is. But I think it's important for us to realize that the king knows he got duped. But he also knows if he's going to be an honorable king, he has to carry out the rules that he signed. Yeah, Braden.
I think an important aspect to note isn't just that he's emotionally distraught over Daniel because it's attached to him personally. It's also because a man in his position wants commanders and leaders who are quality men, they are just generally quality men. But on top of that, if you can find a quality man who can be trusted, that's a truly rare thing to find in a king. And he's proving an incredibly valuable resource in being used out of one of his top advisors.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Sarah?
I wonder if it's possible that beyond being duped by these higher officials, Darius realizes, I had a choice in this decision making. I can't just put it on them. I should have thought this through. I'm responsible for the decisions I make for all these people, but I don't know. Maybe next time I have a big presentation made to me about something so serious, I'll think long and hard before I do it down like that, because I am the end all and be all. Like you said, there's a signal, there's a seal, and that seal means everything.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. He was beating himself up because he made a hasty decision. And he's hoping for the best outcome. And he realized, in a way, I'm just as guilty as my officials because I signed off on this thing. And I didn't think it through nearly as carefully as I should have. Okay, so let's pick it up then in verse 19. Then at the break of day, the king arose and went in haste to the den of lions. As he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions? Then Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him, and also before you, O king. I have done no harm. All right, let's stop there. Morning breaks. The sun comes up. He runs to the lion's den to see if his God delivered him. That tells you a lot about his character and who he was, and what he thought of Daniel. And he cries out in anguish, Daniel, did your God deliver you? Daniel said, yeah, he sent an angel. Isn't that what happened with the three friends? Wasn't there a fourth person in that fire? Probably that was Jesus, but he was a representative from God, just like an angel is. God sent an angel to protect Daniel, just as God sent someone to protect his three friends. Daniel didn't take credit for it. He said, yes, my God sent an angel to close the mouths of the lion. That's pretty amazing that he would phrase it like that. Excuse me. Then the king was exceedingly glad and commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no harm was found on him because he had trusted God. So I want you to try to envision, maybe you've already done this, what's that den look like? You know, kind of, when we talked about the fiery furnace, somehow Nebuchadnezzar could look into and see, so we figured there probably was some kind of mezzanine over the top of the oven. So in our mind's eye, what picture do we have of what this den looks like? And it's not critical, but it kind of adds to the interest of the story, I think. So he came up out of the den. So there probably is a ramp that goes down leading into where the lions are. And as we read the next part of this story, we'll see that ramp kind of plays a part in the way things turn out. So Daniel's come up out of the den, and the king commanded, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the lion's den, they, their children, and their wives. And before they had reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces. So probably this ramp, however long it was, notice that the lions were never said they weren't hungry when Daniel was down there. Their mouths were closed. Soon as the next meal touched foot to the ramp, those lions are on them. Before they even got to the bottom, everybody was taken care of, so to speak. So why would the king also include the wife and the children of these leaders? Bowen?
I mean, and I guess like a practical sense, he's striking fear and saying, I want to see some of y'all try that again.
Okay. Striking fear. I want to see y'all try something like that again. Okay. I think there's an element of truth to that. Rick?
It's very customary in the period we're talking about, ages before up into this time, that you would kill the entire family because generations down you would have retribution sought by the survivors when they came of age. So it was very customary to just, they're gone.
It was. And I think for that very reason, there's not going to be any retribution from your immediate descendants. But it also, there's something else that we've kind of brought up over the course of this, and I think it's God's providence. But it's also the way he brings judgment, national judgment, if you will. Daniel got caught up in that, didn't he? Daniel had done nothing wrong. He and his friends were blameless before God, before they were taken captive. But they got caught up in God's national judgment of Israel. Because of Israel's sins, Daniel was a victim. We have the family of these leaders as similar victims. They are part of God's judgment on them. And as Rick said, probably because it's also a way to limit retribution. And as Bowen said, it's kind of like, here's an example. This is how firm I'm going to be. You do something unlawful under my reign, there will be immediate punishment. And that will send, a pretty strong message to all the citizenry. Okay, questions or comments? Looks like we got about 2 or 3 minutes. Yeah, Leonard.
I'm not sure what all went through Daniel's mind, but when he heard about the document, he could have easily been tempted to say, well, 30 days? I could wait for 30 days, rationalize that. He didn't do that, but he could have also said, I'll show him, I'll stop praying 4 or 5 times a day. He didn't do that either. The verse says he did as he had previously done. He knew what he thought he should do, and he's not going to change that one way or the other.
That's a wonderful point, and I meant to bring something like that if you stated it well, way better than I would have. But that's a message for today's practical application. Daniel's faith was rock solid. And one of the things that Darius recognized about him was that he could have faith, the king could have faith in Daniel's faith. Daniel had an option. 30 days is not that long. So if we're in a situation where we're being asked to compromise our service to the Lord just for a little while, Satan is going to use every trick he can to get us to say, well, yeah, it's just 30 days, or just for this little time period. That's one of his ploys. Daniel said, no, I'm not going to do that. And you know what else I'm not going to do? I'm not going to change. I'm not going to make it myself appear even more pious. I'm going to provide the service to God that I've always given to God. And I'll let God take care of everything else. And so I think there's a wonderful message for us today that we need to be God's servants, the same today and tomorrow and the next day. Brian.
With Daniel being so supposedly trusted by the king, I'm surprised that he signed off on this without the presence of Daniel to advise on it. I guess it was legally permissible to only have the input of 2 advisors instead of 3.
Yeah, I guess. No reason not to, anyway.
That's a good point. My guess is that they very intentionally made sure Daniel didn't know about it and wasn't aware of it, and then they came and presented this to him. I don't think, it would seem from what we find here that this was not coming out of some conclave or anything like this. This is something they taken for themselves to present and produce the document for him.
Yeah.
That they wanted to sign.
Well, they did say, I'll go back to verse 4, the high officials and the satraps sought to find ground. Verse 6, these high officials and satraps came together. Verse 7, all the high officials.
Yeah, that's good.
The implication was that Daniel probably signed it. That's what Darius might have been hearing when he heard all officials. That's certainly what they wanted him to think. And then they embellished a little bit these other 4 categories. Could it be legally binding that one of the officials didn't agree to it? And I think Brian's point, I guess. But it turned out that it blew up in their face, so to speak. So, but before, I want you to think in a minute. If you're one of these high officials and you've got this plot that you're laying out, and you realize that the king is really, really distressed about this. They had to see the king's demeanor, his facial expression, in reaction to, oh no, I've got to bring Daniel in. Didn't make him happy. In fact, it clearly distressed him. You're one of these high officials. So if this all gets played out, let's just say that Daniel does get eaten up by the lion. your relationship to the king just changed, didn't it? I don't think they thought this through either. I just had one of his trusted men killed, and he wasn't happy about it. He, the king, now is going to look at me differently than before. He's going to know I tricked him. I used his own law to get him to do something he didn't want to do. And so now he's not going to look at me with the same level of trust and confidence that he did before all this. Okay, we're out of time. Wednesday, we'll wrap this up in a couple minutes and then go back and kind of review by way of question and answer.
I get from mine says, so these governors and satraps thrown before the king